Welcome back. While delivering his farewell address last night, President Biden issued an urgent warning to the nation while reflecting on his 5 decades in politics, defending his record and touting his accomplishments. The president also warned about the growth of big tech and the dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a few very wealthy people. Channeling President Eisenhower, Mr. Biden dubbed the threat the tech industrial complex.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well.
President Biden went on to sound the alarm about the state of information consumption in America, lamenting the decline of traditional media and accusing social media companies for putting profit over truth.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
Joining me now is NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News deputy tech editor Ben Goggin. Thanks to both of you for being here. Aaron, a lot of people were surprised. They were expecting a farewell address by President Biden that focused on his 50 years of public service. Yes, he did reference that. He talked about what he sees as his big accomplishments. But boy, when he talked about an oligarchy threatening to take over the United States, a lot of people were stunned, surprised. Take us inside your conversation in the White House today. What was behind his decision to make these remarks now?
Yeah, I think stunned is a fair assessment, Kristen. Nobody expected the word oligarch to come up very early in the president's remarks after he talked about the developments in the Middle East, where he suggested that there is an American oligarchy developing where he didn't say directly President-elect Trump, but the inference here is that the billionaire, Donald Trump, along with others who have been in his circle as of late, are part of this developing oligarchy where you have power concentrated in the hands of a very few people, the president described as ultra-rich people in this country. And he set out a warning about that, essentially saying to the American people last night that it was going to be up to them to make sure they're aware of what's developing and that they do the things necessary to combat it. You talked about the tech industrial complex reference that the president made in his speech last night as well. Also something that was a bit unexpected to hear from him. At the same time, we do know this administration has been one that has been focused on artificial intelligence in particular. And that was something the president referenced last night, saying that it represents great possibilities, but also great risks if it's not cared for properly and proper attention isn't paid to it. We did get some of the things that you would expect from a farewell address. This is a president who has spent 50 years in public life and public service. And so he talked about the things that his administration had done over the last 4 years as it relates to job creation and the economy, as it relates to infrastructure work that he's done and the work that he's done to shore up the environment as well. And he did say, Kristen, that it will take time to feel the effects of the work that his administration has done, something that we know really is sort of, I think, essential to who this president is. He was sort of looking at the long game as he was going about policy development during those last 4 years, Kristen. It's
a great point, Aaron, and much as we just saw with former President Jimmy Carter, whose administration was remembered quite differently in history, clearly President Biden aiming for that same exact outcome. Ben, let me turn to you now. You just heard Aaron talk about President Biden's reference to disinformation, misinformation. We've seen a lot of that in the headlines since Election Day. What's the trajectory right now in the tech circles you follow?
Yeah, so what we've been seeing on social media platforms, including Elon Musk's X and Facebook and Meta platforms, is rolling back fact-checking, which is facilitating a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Instead of having third-party fact-checkers where there are verifiable information sources, Meta and X have now switched to these systems that allow the community to vote on what they think is right, essentially. So sometimes this surfaces good information, but oftentimes it can turn into just trolling or, some good fact checking, but some incorrect information. So it's not the most reliable system. And then combined with providing creators new monetization streams, which Meta and X have done. Biden mentioned this, we are seeing people profiting oftentimes off of misinformation. So that is where things are going on social media. And I think that what Biden called out was correct.
And Aaron, just going back to you, I mean, if you look at the polling right now, President Biden delivering this farewell address against a backdrop in which, according to a recent CNN poll, more than 60% of Americans are calling his presidency a failure generally. How do folks inside the White House's inner circle, how are they responding to this broader climate with which he prepares to leave office?
Yeah, I think they just don't see it that way, Kristen, and perhaps that's not surprising, really. The question was put to the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, yesterday about what she would list as the president's successes and failures, and she really didn't touch on anything that this administration sees as having been a failure. We also heard just today, President Biden just returned to the White House a few minutes ago from his armed forces farewell ceremony at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall across the river here, where the Department of Defense said their farewells. And we heard both the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, C.Q. Brown, General C.Q. Brown, really lavish him with praise for the work that he being the president, that for the work that he's done as it relates to shoring up alliances around the world. The Secretary of Defense called him said that he secured his place as the greatest foreign policy president in American history. We heard General Brown talk about the work that the Biden administration has done to increase pay for members of the military. And so I think there are all these little things that different people in the administration would point to say that this administration has been a success. But as you noted, Kristen, history ultimately gets to decide here, and it will be some time before we can really have a full accounting of the Biden administration as the history books will record it.
Yeah, it's a great point, and farewell addresses often written with the history books in mind. Aaron and Ben, thank you so much for a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.